Muhami Matters with Chris Adams, powered by CJA Consulting.
Your customers will trust you if you're evidencing and backing up what you're saying. If you're not, it's only a matter of time before people find you out, and then you lose trust and then you lose business, and we all know where that ends.
So then, what are carbon credits for us lay people?
Being good in business used to just mean being profitable. That isn't the case anymore. Being good in business now means being profitable, but also being ethical and also looking after your staff, looking after the supply chain. One angry or one disgruntled employee with a smartphone wandering through a factory just showing the entire world poor working conditions.
Welcome to Muhami Matters, where credibility meets clarity in legal and professional services. I'm your host, Chris Adams, and today we're diving into the rising wave of ESG in the Middle East. But we're not here for buzzwords, we're here for clarity. And you can't get any clearer than Adam Hoult, who's co-founder of Mutual Carbon Zone. Mutual Carbon Zone is a company that's working to make carbon accounting accessible and achievable for SMEs across the globe. So whether you're a managing partner, head of compliance, in procurement, or just trying to make sense of something that's going to get your business ahead, this episode is for you. Hey, Adam, nice to have you on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about Mutual Carbon Zone, how you came to be.
Yeah. I, from a teenager, joined the Air Force in the UK, and then left nearly 16 years ago now, moved out here to the UAE. Was involved in facility management for a chunk of time, and then got into management consulting, which is where I met the guys who were trying to launch Neutral Carbon Zone, and I got involved from there. And so a few years ago, we launched Neutral Carbon Zone, trying to address that gap in the market for SMEs to be able to measure their carbon footprints.
So what do you do in practical terms then?
So the only real way that a company used to be able to measure the carbon footprint was to go to a consultant, and consultants are quite expensive.
Yeah.
So what it basically meant was only the large companies who've got the budgets could afford to do it. The little guys were sort of at sea, as it were. And so what we did was basically standardize and digitize the process, and then make it super easy for people to drop information in, and then our system can put information out. Because it's in a standardized way, the black box can do all the intellectual thinking, and then we can have our staff focus on helping the company collect the information from within their own business, rather than having to worry about the calculations. So it just makes it quicker, and it means that we can do it significantly cheaper because we can systematize and automate a lot of stuff. So that's on a day-to-day basis. That's what we actually end up doing, is helping companies find the data within their own business.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You and I spoke actually recently about a client that we were looking at, who's a relatively medium-sized company, 200 or so headcount, and they've been asked to provide some ESG data, and to do the full, work through I think you said the consultants or the agencies is up to 100,000 dirhams, that sort of thing, and takes 6 to 8 months. So
yeah.
Mutual Carbon Zone, as you mentioned, kind of shortens that process. Yeah. Tell us a bit about the model behind that, and how you're really achieving the reduction in costs, but also the shortening in that time frame to actually get results quicker.
Yeah. It's standardization is the key.
Okay.
So what a consultant does at the beginning is they do what we call, they draw a boundary of assessment, right? And so they will ring fence off parts of the business that are being measured, and they will decide how they're going to measure it based upon the data that they've got access to. Now, that's brilliant, but it has a couple of problems. The first problem is you never actually know what's been measured without going through a 40-page report top to bottom, right. Which, let's be honest, nobody's ever doing, no. Right? And then the other issue is that's quite time consuming, because everything is bespoke and everything is different. So what we did is we created our program where we have our blue, silver, gold, platinum sort of journey, where we ring fence off an exact boundary assessment for all silvers. All silvers are the same. All golds are the same. All platinums are the same. No ifs, no buts, no arguments. And it follows the same methodological approach. for how we account for it. So at that point, because it's standard, we can standardize the way that data is going into our system, and then we can standardize the way that data is coming out of the system. The system can do all of the intellectual running around and the hard stuff. So it just makes the whole thing much easier. We try and work with people for a 12-week period, but that's literally because there's 12 key topics, and it's just comfortable for people to say, right, this week, just get me your energy bills, and then we'll meet next week. Next week, just get me your vehicle fleet information. So actually, I mean, we've had companies that go through and collect their entire data and get a report in under a week. But most companies, everyone's got 100 things to do every day, and they've only got enough time to do 80 of them. So we just try and be a small piece, and we'll just go chunk by chunk, week by week. Weeks seem to work for people. It's comfortable.
Okay, and why do companies even need to care about ESG? I mean, I mentioned obviously the company that we were discussing the other day, which has been asked as a supplier to complete obligations, complete some compliance registrations, but otherwise, why should businesses really worry about this and even think about it?
We have two core drivers in most of our customer base, right? We have people who sustainability is like a core part of their ethos or their service offering, and if you're going to sort of angle your business in that direction, then you have to do it credibly. If you're going to do it credibly, you need to start measuring what you're doing, whether that's the full ESG, because ESG, environmental, social, governance. We as carbon accounting is only one small, well, it's not small, it's a big element, but one element of the E, right, of the environmental piece. There's much more that goes on inside that. Yeah, so those companies, if you're going to hang your hat on that, then you need to do it credibly. You need to evidence what you're doing. It's all about trust, really, right? Your customers will trust you if you're evidencing and backing up what you're saying. If you're not, it's only a matter of time before people find you out, and then you lose trust, and then we lose business, and we all know where that ends. So that's sort of one angle. The other angle is a lot of large organizations, governments, if you're looking at, for example, listing your company on an exchange somewhere, the exchanges, they now are requesting this information. Like, they don't want to do business with you unless you can demonstrate that you are working, we use the word ethically, but sustainably. Basically, you're looking after the environment, you're looking after the people, and sort of inside your business and outside, so your local community and your supply chain and so on. And then you've got governance in place to make sure that you are doing things properly. If the government demands from larger companies a lot of information, most companies, like their emissions and all of their risk, is sat in the supply chain. So they can't give the information to the people that are asking it from them without asking their suppliers. And so they go out to the medium-sized companies, and then eventually the medium-sized companies hit the same problem, because most of their risk, most of their emissions, it's all sat in their supply chain. So they're now going out to the smaller companies. And this is where we sort of came into it, because the big companies can afford to pay. The medium companies, a lot of them can afford to pay. The moment you get down to SMEs, they can't afford an ESG manager. They can't afford to pay for consultants. And ultimately, eventually they end up with being told, if you can't give me this information, I can't declare it to my customers, so I can't use you as a supplier anymore. I'm sorry, but I can't.
Right.
And they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They haven't got the money to do it, and then they're being told if they don't do it, they're going to lose a customer. Which, if it's a small customer, you might take it on the chin. But for a lot of people, the bigger corporate clients that are asking this information, they're a big part of their revenue. You can't afford to lose it.
So then is this demand from the bigger clients, which, as you say, just filters down like a waterfall, is it being driven by government and regulatory requirements, or is it being driven more by the moral side, or
It is both. The governments are trying to push it because everybody wants to be able to demonstrate that their economy is a nice economy. Being good in business used to just mean being profitable. That isn't the case anymore. Being good in business now means being profitable, but also being ethical, and also looking after your staff, looking after the supply chain. Woe betide anybody who gets caught on the wrong side of that. You have all these sort of scandals of it was VW, wasn't it, with the emissions. They were trying to say their diesel engines were really efficient and whatever, and they were fudging the computer numbers to make it look. Just no, don't do it. But yeah, and so then customers will just start boycotting you. They had a thing. Was it? I can't think. One of the retail companies. Yeah, their factories are in like Bangladesh, and they're not paying their people, and they're dumping chemicals into the water systems. And there was a big collapse in one of them, and people died. And like your customers just go, I'm not wearing those shirts anymore. If that's what you're doing to people, like I'm just not doing it. So you being good now. You have to be good in all senses of the word, not just profitable.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is, I guess, with the rise of social media, with the people are visible. Companies are very, very visible now, and it doesn't take much for you to appear in a bad light. And then you've got to really start spending a lot of money on commerce professionals and actually fixing the problem really, really quickly, which obviously just adds time, cost, and a lot of stress, and you might lose a lot of clients.
I mean, one angry or one disgruntled employee with a smartphone wandering through a factory, just showing the entire world poor working conditions. You're spent.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to be doing the right thing. You've got to be looking after people. You've got to be looking after your community. You've got to be looking after the environment. You've got to be doing all of that whilst making money. Like, business is tough.
So I think, from my point of view, and this is very anecdotal, but I feel like in the Middle East there hasn't been as much push for, at least from a regulatory or formal side, on environmental issues and requiring companies to comply. Have you seen a change recently, particularly after COP was recently in the UAE, and even me as a regular business owner has seen the government say, okay, actually, there are strict requirements we need to put in place. We have obligations morally and also as part of UN or whatever it may be to have compliance and be good people. Have you seen a lot of changes like that over the last few years?
Yeah. I mean, like this things move fast in this region. Across sort of Europe, they moved early on this stuff. And so this region didn't move. They weren't the first to move, but then they've made the decision, and they'll go with it. I mean, this year, back in at the end of May, the UAE brought its first law in that demands that certain specific organisations have to start declaring their carbon footprint. For example, that was the first time they've done that. So yeah, that is now impacting like really big companies, but to my earlier point, right, it's a matter of time before that filters to the smaller companies, and eventually, it filters right the way down through the economy. But yeah, I mean, big global players are all here now as well, and they're all governed by wherever their main head office is domiciled, whether it's the US, Europe, wherever, and so they're held by these certain standards, and they have to hold themselves by it globally. So that's coming over as well, which is back to my point of, if you're an SME and you've got a large corporate client, especially if it's a global organization, like the clock is ticking as to how long it is before you start getting asked questions on this stuff. And you need to start having answers. You need to be able to prove that you are doing what you claim to be doing or what you say you're doing.
So then what are carbon credits? Well, I mean, for us lay people, what is it? What does your report actually deliver? And what is it measuring?
Yeah, so okay, credits is a different thing. So we've got the reporting element, right? The reporting element is basically, it's the old mantra, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So if you want to know what your impact is on the environment, what your greenhouse gases are, you need to measure your carbon footprint. We use carbon. Carbon is like a unit of measurement. They actually say it's actually CO2e. It's carbon equivalent. We have other gases in there as well that have a carbon equivalent, right? So we use the term carbon. It's not actually just carbon.
Right.
But yeah, so we're basically, there's 12 main categories of different fuels, water, electricity, vehicle fleet, your staff's commuting, home working if they do, your purchase goods and services, like deliveries upstream, downstream. So there's all this stuff going on, and we pull this information in, we calculate what the carbon footprint is of each of those individual bits, and then we present it to you with a report. You'll be able to see from that report, it sounds quite complicated. It's actually remarkably simple. And then you'll see which parts of your business have got the highest emissions driver. Like, there's some obvious things in there. Like if you, for example, have got a large vehicle fleet, that's going to be a huge emissions driver. If you're a factory, for example, that's got loads of machines running air conditioning, your scope 2, which is your electricity, is going to be a huge emissions driver. But seeing it gives you the ability to be able to, if you're going to try and reduce your carbon footprint, which ultimately what we're all trying to do from an economic level, from a macroeconomic level, right the way down. If you're going to try and reduce your emissions, you need to know where it's coming from. You get a lot of people who, we've gone paperless in the office, and we've no more plastic bottles in the office. Yeah, well, and it's good. It really is good. We should be doing this sort of stuff. But then they measure their carbon footprint, and they realise that's 0.0002% of their emissions. And it's like, meanwhile, they've got all these heavy diesel vans driving around or something. And it's like, yeah, mate, let's start with the vans. We'll try and make it more efficient. We'll try and electrifying your fleet has a huge impact. Because people misunderstand the electrification argument as well. The electric engines are significantly more efficient, which is an upside. But the real benefit comes from getting the energy from non-carbon burning resources, right? So from renewable energy. You combine those two things together, and you've got a huge carbon reduction. So that's like the reporting side of it. The carbon credit side. Think of buying carbon credits as like crowdfunding green initiatives.
Crowdfunding green initiatives, okay.
Yeah. So if you're in India now, you're a town in India and you need more power because the town's growing, you're most probably going to be building a coal power plant, and coal's going to be dropping CO2 out into the atmosphere like it's going out of fashion, right? And it might be, I don't know, double the price to put wind farms there instead. So if you're gonna, you as a business, you measure your carbon footprint. If you buy carbon credits, what you're effectively doing is funding the shortfall so that they put a wind farm in instead of putting a coal power plant in. Right. And so that it's at a point. So the more power that's produced from a wind farm, as an example, the more carbon you have avoided from what you would have done burning coal. And so they basically, every year, the wind farm will produce so many megatons, and then they'll sell those off as carbon credits. And that, A, funds the difference, and then B, helps them make profit. Like, ultimately, if it's profitable for them to do it, they'll do it, right? So the carbon credit idea is, it's almost like a self-imposed tax, right? So you measure your emissions, it's 2,000 tons. So you go away, 1 ton is 1 credit. So you go away, you buy 2,000 tons of carbon credits from a program. Maybe in India there's put a wind farm in, or a solar plant, or whatever it might be. That's costing you money, right? So if you make a commitment to do that, now it's actually in your own best interest to try and reduce your carbon footprint, because now you're reducing your own self-imposed tax.
Okay. So we have an electric car in our family, and I think that's great. But instead of putting petrol in it, I pay from the mains to power the car. So that's obviously a cost of my electricity bill. But then I think, where is the actual electricity coming from? And is it, if it's, okay, so in the UAE, it is actually probably a bit more responsible and modern than what it is in a lot of other countries where it's from coal or from, real fossil fuels. But how does it sort of balance out? Is the cost of energy and oil worse than getting your electricity from a coal power plant and powering your car that way?
There's a couple of elements to that. In the UAE, we've gone restricted because you only have D1, right? But elsewhere, you can choose to get your energy from a supplier who is exclusively using green energy, right?
Okay.
It's exclusively solar or wind farms or whatever it might be. But this is a good point, actually. This is why people, or one of the reasons why you do a carbon footprint report every year, because the data is released from governments and from certain bodies around the world every year on exactly this. So in the UK, the emissions factors associated with 1 kilowatt of energy, for example, changes year on year, because exactly what you're talking about. It might be 30% of energy is from green sources and 20% is from gas, and another percentage is from coal. And then as coal plants close and new other plants open up or nuclear comes in, the actual profile of the energy that's being provided changes year on year. And so the amount of carbon that you're using per kilowatt hour changes every time. And so a lot of this stuff is what we're keeping track of, like on the customer's behalf. We make sure our systems are all updated year on year, so that we're using the appropriate emissions factors, so that you get an accurate reading. But yeah, I mean, here there's huge amounts of solar now. The profile is this massively changing, and eventually we've got targets in the UAE to do. I don't think we'll ever get to exclusively green energy, because there'll always be an element. But we're really forging forward on that front. We'll be one of the highest green energy producers going before long. Yeah.
I think once solar energy becomes like really, really efficient, then places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE were really, really set up. But I don't know how far away that is. And probably that's well beyond both our areas of expertise. Well, definitely beyond mine. Okay, so now thinking more on the practical elements. So I understand how you would measure the impact from a manufacturing company, or from a courier company that has a fleet of vans, or a company that has a fleet of trucks, or a factory, whatever it may be. But a lot of our listeners are professional services firms and companies, so they're law firms, they're accounting firms, they're hospitals, these sort of things. Okay, I can think of ways off the top of my head to save energy, is using less paper or recycling paper, I guess shutting down your computers at night and this sort of thing. But how relevant is it for companies that are essentially professionally based in office premises or working from home? I guess how can we actually improve our carbon footprint and meet our obligations?
Firstly, you've got to do is measure it.
You've got
no idea what you're aiming at.
Yes, true.
You literally got no idea. But yeah, so we've got a fair amount of professional services, accountancy firms, legal firms, stuff like that. Most companies, this is a very broad statement, but most companies, the bulk of their emissions is actually in their supply chain.
Right.
You're talking, I want to say the bulk, you're talking 70, 80%. There's some companies out there that, outsourcing companies, that are literally 95, 97% of their emissions are sat in their supply chain. So yeah, there's the work that you need to do as that type of business is actually engaging with your suppliers and choosing your suppliers sort of wisely, right? But again, the only way that you know that is A, you've got to measure it in the first place, and B, you've got to talk to the suppliers, right? And that's that's like, we have our blue, silver, gold, platinum. That's our platinum piece. It's the supply chain element at the end, right? And it's like, you haven't got control over it. So A, it's daunting because you haven't got control over it, and nobody likes that. And B, it looks like a lot of hard work, because most companies have got 100, 200, 300 suppliers. It's like, how the hell am I going to get all this information from the, But and that's ultimately what you've done, right? The way we built our platform was just to facilitate that and make it easier. And we do webinars with people now. We can get 100 suppliers on a webinar. We can sort of talk to them all, let them know what we're doing, why we're doing it. Just comfort them that we're going to make it easy for them as well, because they've got the same thing. You're sat here and you're thinking, oh God, this is a nightmare. I don't know what to do. Right? And then you get on the phone to your suppliers and they're all thinking exactly the same
absolutely.
thing. Some of them are thinking, I'm not interested in this. But that's kind of where you get to, right? I mean, ultimately, you'll have your early adopters, have your people who go, yeah, we're already measuring, we're super cool. And so you'll take that information, you'll include it in your emissions reports, and they'll be actively trying to reduce their emissions as well. As they reduce theirs, it just reduces yours by default, right? Because, if your supplier does $10 million a year and you're $1 million on it, for easy numbers, just assume that you're 10% of their emissions, right? If they reduce their emissions down by 10%, it's just chopped that bit of your emissions profile by the same percentage, right? So if you're dealing with suppliers who are actively working towards the same end goals, it's the reverse of all rising tide raises all ships, right? Like, reducing emissions reduces everyone's emissions. But yeah, eventually you end up at a point where you've got a nice part of your supply chain who are engaged and they're working with you and they're actively trying to reduce their emissions, which is helping you achieve your goal. And then you've got the guys who are just not interested. And ultimately, you kind of end up with this point of the same conversation that your customers are potentially having with you. If you can't give me this information, mate, I can't do business with you. Sorry. You end up having the same conversation. So you cleanse through your supply chain like that. And then eventually you end up with an entire supply chain that's all, rowing in the same direction.
So, Adam, there are, I think, a lot of different frameworks out there. So when a procurement, I guess, driven requirement comes through for a company and they ask, I guess, to benchmark against various different frameworks, are these questionnaires and these frameworks measuring the supply chain impact, or is it really just looking at the company that's being assessed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the answer is both.
Okay.
Most of these frameworks will do a similar kind of journey like I was describing with us, right? You start off with more simple information, you get your bronze award, and then by the time you're going all the way through your supply chain, you're up at like the platinum award level. And so a lot of what they're asking for is basically just evidence that you're doing the right thing, so to speak. That you are not polluting, that you are trying to minimize your carbon footprint, that you are not employing child labor somewhere out in the Far East and, that sort of stuff, right? That you have the appropriate governance processes in place to make sure that stuff isn't happening, right? That gives your customer or that procurement manager confidence that he's not going to accidentally be employing child labor somewhere through you, right? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of focus at the beginning of you on your business, but as you go on that, they might start demanding more and more information from you, or you might start thinking, well, actually, this is a key customer. I do want to be at the top of their list. I want them to come to me first, so I'm going to push myself on that journey just to position myself at the top of their list of interesting suppliers, right? As a differentiator. So yeah, I mean that. It's across the broader whole ESG spectrum as well as just the carbon measurement side of it.
Yeah, you're right, because I've been thinking very much about the E, I suppose, overall and in our conversation, but it is the S and the G that we can't forget about, I guess. They are arguably just as important, if not more important, than the E bit.
Yeah, people want to know. If you think from a social standpoint, you've kind of got three sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Like three environments. You've got your internal environment, which is your staff. They want to make sure that you're treating your staff well, right? You've kind of got your customer environment. You want to make sure you're treating them well and looking after them and so on. But you've also kind of got your community environment. You want to be contributing to your local community, if it's your local town or if it's your industry or so it's back to my point before about it. You can't just be good at making money anymore. You've got to be all these other things. You've got to be looking after the environment. You've got to be responsible to you. Yeah, I mean that's the whole Jordan Peterson thing, right? It's like just take responsibility for yourself. That's what gives you meaning. You sort of broaden that out to an organizational level. It gives your organization meaning.
Right. So in practical terms, then, what should companies start doing in order to prepare for ESG compliance? What kind of documents and frameworks do we need in place in order to be compliant and cut out the challenge when we actually get asked for it?
Yeah. I mean, you can engage with your customers and just see if they're thinking about this stuff, and which frameworks they're going to adhere to, because it's. I don't want to poke at procurement people. The cynic within you could say that it's sort of laziness. Like, just get EcoVadis, and then I, as a procurement person, don't really have to think about it, and it's kind of done, right? If a procurement team was really into what was really focused on this, they would do what they call the materiality assessment. They would decide what's material to them, right? So if you're on a coffee business, for example, you would want to know where the coffee is coming from. You want to know the farmers are getting a fair wage. You want to know that it's sustainable farming practices. So you would include these questions into your supply chain onboarding, and you would ask people to evidence that stuff. Yeah, it's easy to just go, just give us a GRI compliant report, or just get EcoVadis certified, and then we'll consider it done, because you're sort of outsourcing the responsibility to them at that point.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's those sorts of things. There are, you're going to hit both. You're going to hit both of those, of people being quite specific, which is good. If you as a business should be able to preempt that element of it. If you're talking the other sort of standards that are around the world, if you have an element within your business where you're already recording what you've got as processes, ultimately the governance section is processes and policies.
Yeah.
And you will get asked for unusual things like, anti-modern slavery policies, and you'll be like, we're a legal firm with 15 people in an office. Like, why have we got an anti-modern slavery policy? And you will end up just templating things like that, because it isn't really very material to you. But there will be elements of it that you can preempt, and then you'll be able to just have this stuff ready. You won't necessarily have compiled it all into a nice, neat-looking report that's all branded and stuff, but you'll at least have answers to the questions. A lot of it is just answering the questions and then uploading the PDF or some evidence or whatever it might be just to support it. And you will have a lot of this stuff inside your business already. So really it's just about collecting it, preempting the questions and collecting it.
So what sort of data do we need to collect? You mentioned anti-modern slavery, for example. So I guess the HR team, ideally, or the operations team would need to have, I guess, proof of minimum wage compliance, and everyone's got a contract and there's working hours. So I guess that would cover off most of that. What other sort of policies are we talking that we might need to just think about having in place?
It depends on the industries and stuff like that. It really is quite...
Well, we're thinking professional service and thinking law firms, accountancy firms, who, quite frankly, and again, not poking fun at procurement teams, but from my experience, having responded to a lot of complex RFPs in my 15, 16 years, is that we'd get these RFPs through, or applications to be appointed to a panel, and these more, when we're not talking about the specific scope of work, when we're talking like, it's almost like a tick box exercise to say, do you have a trade license? How many employees do you have? When are you founded? What's your turnover? All this sort of stuff. They're very rarely tailored to professional services firms. So you will have like questions like, how many trucks have you got in your fleet? And this is a mandatory question because it's online. You can't just say not applicable, but that's not an option. You have to say something. That's a very facetious example, but this is what happens. So what can we do to preempt this? Because frankly, it's very time consuming. And often on short deadlines that you're trying to pull all this stuff together. So for a professional services point of view, what are your recommendations?
Okay, so I would say this because I'm neutral carbon. So your carbon footprint is an easy place to start.
Okay, yeah.
But no, like genuinely it is.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. It's often just showing something, and something formal that's certified is really an easy win in my view.
It's intent, right?
Yes.
You can say, look, you can answer NA. Look, we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have the other, or we're working on it, so to speak. But you are going to have to show some form of intent, right? It's like, look, we've measured our carbon footprint. We've got a carbon reduction plan in place. A carbon reduction plan, again, it might sound like it's a lot of work, but you could do a very simple reduction plan that's like, most of our emissions are in our electricity bills, for example. So by 2035, we want to have put solar panels somewhere to be able to, whatever. It's simple. You don't have to give yourself crazy targets. But it's just showing intent that we're there. We recognise that even as a law firm, we've got a carbon footprint, and we're going to try and do our best to minimise it. A lot of the social element of it is things like, again, how are you helping your local community? How are you helping your staff? How are you helping your customers? And looking after them, make sure they're safe. Whatever you've got going on around that, whether you do, a lot of people do things like give staff 2 or 3 days off a year to go and do charity work. Perfect. A little one-pager on that is absolutely fine. And then the governance element, I would imagine as legal firms, the governance element, they've probably got quite a lot of documentation in there anyway, just through the very nature of it, right? But you're just I know, yeah. You just want to demonstrate that you have some formalized way of making sure that your business is doing what you're saying it's doing. No one's perfect. There's going to be gaps. There's always going to be gaps like that. But no, okay, if a customer is going to start kicking you because you've got gaps there, you've got to start questioning whether you even want the customer. Like, like we're being open, we're being honest. We are putting everything in front of you to show you that we're doing what we can do. And we've got a plan in the future to be doing more than what we're doing now. If anyone's asking more than that of you, I would say they're being unreasonable.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it's difficult to preempt, but those sort of key things within your business, I think you'll have something there to at least be able to submit, even if it's not completely what they're after. They want such and such a policy document. It's like, well, I don't have a policy document for it, but here's one pager that demonstrates that we actually do this thing.
Yes, and certainly I think we went somewhere like Neutral Carbon Zone and had a certification, then it shows great intent, right? It shows actual achievement, great intent. And aside from the procurement side and needing to be registered as a supplier, then that is a great message to put on your website. That is a great message to put on your social media. I'm saying this from a marketing perspective, professional perspective, but these things are easy wins, and not that many companies are doing it. So actually, it's quite an easy way to stand out as a really good company that shows that you're really professional and that you practice what you preach, and you really stand head and shoulders above your competitors. So I guess, Adam, what if we took one thing away, one step that every business leader listening to this, or every professional services company listening to this, has to do right now, today, what would it be? Come to Neutral Carbon Zone, of course, but
naturally. Okay, if you're going to do an actual step, I would actually say research your customer base as to what their stated future goals are, right? Because that's going to tell you what's coming. But if you're talking actual physical steps, measure it, whatever it is, whether it's your carbon footprint, or whether it's what you're doing in the local community, or whether it's what you're doing as part of your governance structure within your business. Measure it. Like if you can demonstrate that you're measuring it. I mean, first of all, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So you just by measuring it, you are demonstrating intent, right? So whatever it is that's going to be material to your business, start measuring it. And it's difficult then to not do something about it. Like, do you know what I mean? I'll use my carbon footprint as an example. If you suddenly realize that commuting is the largest part of your carbon footprint as a business, your staff getting to work, right? And you realize that that's like 50% of your emissions or something. Like, it's difficult not to look at that and go, can we tell everyone just to work at home for one day a week?
Yeah.
That would chop it by 20% straight out of the gate. Like, once you see a problem, most people are like, we'll try and do something about it. So simply by the act of measuring it highlights some obvious quick wins, and then it's difficult to not try and implement it. And everybody wants to feel like they've had a successful day, right? And if we've chopped our carbon emissions by 20% by a simple thing, then we'll do it. So yeah, I would say whatever the material thing is in your business, measure it, and then you'll start taking action just naturally.
And actually, that's a really great example you just gave, because yes, it has the effect on reducing the carbon footprint, maybe as much as 20%, just by having not all of your staff in the office all day. It means you have a smaller office, you have less cars on the road, but also from the S and the G side of things, you're showing that you have flexible working, you're supporting families, working mothers, working fathers, even, people who just need, what do they call in the US, a personal day, which is, not... Yeah. This is what people need, a mental health day sometimes. And a mental health day can sometimes be just, I don't need to get in the car today. I don't need to get dressed in a suit and tie and go to the office. I can just work here in a polo shirt in my own environment, and there's less stress. There's no loss to the company, in my view. It is just a gain for everybody.
I mean, I, in a previous life, was driving to Abu Dhabi every day. like having the option to work from home maybe 2 days a week was giving me 3 hours back that day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 3 hours. It meant that I didn't have to get up at 4:30 in the morning to cycle. Right? It meant that I could get up at 5:30. It's still early for a lot of people, but 5:30 is a lie-in for me.
Yes.
And I could go cycling, and then I can just chill out, and I can have a nice breakfast. I can have a coffee. I can chat to my wife and kids as they disappear out the door, and then I can get upstairs and go with my day, as opposed to getting up, trying to smash myself for 30 minutes on a turbo trainer somewhere, and then shower in a dark room because I don't want to wake the kids, and then drive for an hour and a half down to Abu Dhabi. Like, just simply that on its own, it's a huge relief.
Yeah, I think from the mental health point of view as well. I mean, it's just sometimes it's that thought of having to, you've got to do it the next day. You've got to get up early. You've got to sit in the car for an hour and a half. It is quite a mental, and you're tired. You get tired from that drive. So yeah, I think it's a complete win-win. Perfect. Right. Well, thanks very much for joining us today, Adam. If people want to reach out to you and to Neutral Carbon Zone, what's the best way to do so?
Well, I'm Adam at neutralcarbonzone.com. You can literally just drop a note on our website. There's contact us. You can contact me on LinkedIn. I'm easily found, as are all the rest of the staff. We have our own podcast, E-Mission Possible, that you can find on the usual places. There's any way that anybody wants to reach out, no issue at all.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. For our audience, a huge thank you on their behalf to Adam Hoult for joining us today, cutting through the ESG noise and with actual really good practical tips on helping us to understand what really matters to Middle East businesses in catering to the requirements, whether it's a moral and social requirement or obligation, or what's being imposed by the actual chain that they're suppliers of. So really appreciate your time, Adam. Thank you for all your poignant advice. For our audience, if you found today's episode useful, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone in your network. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there and companies trying to navigate these changes. For more support, visit muhami.ae or connect with me, Chris Adams, at CJX Consulting. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered. Thank you for joining us on Muhami Matters. If you found today's episode valuable, subscribe and connect with me to stay updated. Join me again soon as we continue to bring you credible insights, practical strategies, and trusted advice to empower your professional journey. I'm Chris Adams. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered.